everyone. Welcome to the KE Report and a company update with Vizsla Silver. I am chatting with Mike Pettingell, the Senior Vice President of Business Development and Strategy at Vizsla Silver. We are going to be focusing on exploration because of the last news release on July 30th that is a long news release outlining all the exploration objectives and some of the goals the company has this year and in future years. Vizsla is traded on the NYSE and the TSX under the symbol VZLA. Mike, let's start off with kind of a broad overview on the exploration objectives for this year, the big picture goals that the company is trying to accomplish with the drill bit, and it sounds like even looking for new discoveries. Take us through, again, big picture plans this year.
Absolutely. And thanks, Corey, for having us on and having myself on for the first time. Happy to be here. So yeah, this release that we published yesterday really outlines, our plans for the remainder of the year. Not only to, enhance Project One that we're developing rapidly in the West, but also in the hunt for Project Two, because this district is large, it's very underexplored, and it's ripe for new discoveries. Beyond that contiguous District One, we've also got immense potential, more blue sky potential that exists in these additional acquisitions that we've made along trend. So growing our overall land package from around 7,200 hectares to over 40,000 hectares now. So the key objectives for this year in terms of exploration: complete 25,000 meters of exploration-focused drilling. And I think that's a really important point. It's not infill, and it's really not extensional targeting for this exploration drilling. This is true exploration drilling that could identify new centers of mineralization. We've completed 8,000 meters of that program to date. We also want to complete an updated airborne electromagnetic survey. We want to do this covering the entire contiguous Panuco district. And I say contiguous, meaning that all of these concessions are connected. And so you've got the ability to really explore on a consolidated basis all of these different concessions. That airborne TEM or electromagnetic survey will really complement the HLEM survey that we published those results yesterday in the press release. We also want to continue advancing our mapping efforts. For those of you that have any geologic bone in you, you know that boots on the ground mapping and sampling is geology 101, right? You can't start drilling drill holes and spending those dollars until you really have a sense of why it's a target and if there is a significant chance of success. So we've mapped about 68% of that first contiguous district now, with lots of ground covering historic areas of mining that we still need to test. We also want to generate near mine targets on some of those newly acquired properties: Santa Fe, La Garra, and San Enrique. Santa Fe being our most priority here, given it's got a past producing center and an actual operating mine right now. It's a small scale project doing about 1 million ounces of silver a year. But that's an excellent area for us to go in and around, where we've got about 6 vein targets that we know about already, and look to expand and ultimately publish a 43-101 compliant resource. So that's ongoing as well with I think we've got 3 geos now on the ground at Santa Fe conducting that initial mapping and sampling program.
All right, Mike, let's start with some of these resource expansion targets. You have figure 1 in the news release, pretty clearly circles 3 areas, all that look closer to surface compared to what you already have in the resource. Talk to us about, again, that drilling that's happening right now and how you see these expansion targets playing out.
Yeah, absolutely. So just to take a step back, when we think about our proposed mine area in the west, it really covers 2 primary vein corridors, and that's how we separate them out. One is the Copala corridor, and that's arguably the highest grade, broadest widths, and where we will focus initially for mining. That's what it was in the PEA, and of course, the pending feasibility study that will come out in the back end of this year will also contemplate mining initially at Copala. So that's a big focus for us. The second one is the Napoleon corridor. Also very productive in terms of mineral endowment. It's a bit more narrow and it's a bit lower grade, but again, it's still a major center for us. So we've got extensional targets along both of those primary structural corridors. What you see in that figure one there, the Copala structure, as mentioned, is where we will initiate mining. You're seeing that we've got these targets, these three ellipses that, go down towards depth. Well, what we've identified is that there's the potential for new mineralized shoots that exists right along where those ellipses are. Where those ellipses sit, we've had very limited drilling to date, but the results that we do have all the hallmarks of having increased mineralization and being able to absolutely define a resource that goes up dip or up section closer to surface. And that's exactly what we're going to test. Now, we likely will not be doing that from surface. You can see topography there is a bit more challenging than it is a bit further to the north. However, we've got the test mine ongoing, and so there will be underground drill bays that we can get very targeted to test these key targets.
So, Mike, what about these proximal targets as well? And there's a few others that you highlight in figure two. Just talk to us about the distance that these targets would be from, let's just say, Copala.
Yeah, so the way to think about the exploration upside here at Panuco, and I've been quoted saying this many times, we look at it as the layers of the exploration onion. And so when we look at that figure two, that's in the press release, you can see the purple ellipse. That's right around the mining center. And those really represent those expansionary targets that are along the open-ended veins that make up the current resource base. That yellow ellipse, that represents the proximal targets or near mine targets, you could refer to them as. Those are targets that if we have a discovery, you are within haulage distance to that proposed mill site, and it can absolutely complement that future mine plan, right? The mine plan that'll come out in the FS and beyond. And so we're really focused on obviously driving forward that production at project one to get to cash flow. These targets that fall within the proximal area, such as San Peter, San Jack, targets that are at La Luisa there, where we've identified a 400-meter gap in the mineralization, and also the intersection of Napoleon and La Colorada. Those targets, if there is success, again, could certainly be brought right to that proposed mill site and be tacked on right into that mine plan.
So then, Mike, out of the 8,000 meters that's done now, where has that drilling happened, and what's the remaining of that 25,000 meters? Where is that going to be focused?
Yeah, it's a great question. So we've got a rig that's been drilling offensive holes over in that San Jack, San Peter. We've also got few holes now that we've started testing at the intersection of Napoleon and La Colorada. But also some of those meters were focused on the Animas target that's more distal, right? That's a target that would really be in the hunt for project two. Although it could complement project one if we are able to identify a meaningful center of mineralization in the east or the central portion of the district, it very well could justify its own standalone mill. And so of the 25,000 meters, 8,000 has gone towards that Animas and more distal targets with a little bit of drilling going into this San Jack, San Peter, and proximal area. The bulk of the remainder of drilling will really be dedicated towards pure exploration, as I said. So really not within the purple ellipse, certainly within this yellow proximal ellipse, as well as these district scale targets that are off towards the east.
So, Mike, since we're still talking about Project One, look, the company has already a massive resource. So, in terms of new discoveries or expanding of resources, what in your eyes actually moves the needle here? Is it higher grade? Is it simply size? What would make a big difference for the company to keep following up and for investors?
Yeah, I think incremental success in any way can complement the mine plan. And then, of course, if you're able to identify a true meaningful center, and I'm talking about an additional Copala, right? Something that hosts 200 plus million ounces of silver equivalent, that could absolutely move the needle, right? But the incremental success of grabbing more mineralization at Luisa, grabbing more mineralization at Cruz Negra or along Napoleon and those up dip sections of Copala, they will absolutely bolster the current mine plan and generate economics, in subsequent studies, right? Obviously moving the needle for shareholders.
Now, would that come down to expanding mine life, or could it also be just simply mining more material over a year?
Well, it gives you optionality. If you're able to discover higher grade, more near surface mineralization that you could realistically and efficiently in terms of a cost basis bring into a mine plan earlier on, then you'll absolutely do that. When you look at, for those of you that do any sort of modeling on a discounted cash flow basis, you'll be aware that those first few years, those cash flows are most important and really drive your economics. If we were to tack on stuff towards the end of the mine life, the present values of those cash flows, they get eroded very, very quickly. And so finding mineralization that you could incrementally tuck in, it actually does better in terms of economics than it does to have something be tucked in on the back end. So we want to find it all, right? And that's why we're not going to be sleepy here while we're just developing the next world-class silver mine. We want to maintain that exploration momentum and continue to discover and continue reworking and optimizing the mine plan to fully maximize the value of this project.
Okay, that makes sense. This is all at what you guys are calling Project 1, but then there's this whole other exploration angle of the hunt for Project 2. You first outlined some district targets here, and just to be clear, these targets, I believe, are on the Panuco project. They're just further to the east from where we're calling Project 1 right now. So talk to us about these district targets, when you could be drilling them, what work still needs to be done there. Give us insights here.
Yeah, absolutely. And so the district that, is on figure 3, again, in the press release, that contiguous district package, it's about 15 kilometers long by around 7 kilometers wide, right? And so, if we're looking at scale to get up towards these eastern targets, it is a 10-kilometer haul. And frankly, you are going uphill. This is the reason why these are a bit more challenging. We've got limited mapping in this area as well. And frankly, we haven't focused too much on these areas given the amount of success we've realized to date in the West, right? But these targets are all based on, historic mining. So using those historic mining centers as a vectoring tool to find new mineralization. They're based on the geology and the structural preparation that exists in these areas. And so what we've whittled down out of our, call it 160 plus drill ready targets identified to date is these 5 targets that you see. And we presented this last year. We started doing initial field work on these targets last year, reconnaissance drilling. And now we've got a drill budget and program planned for some of these targets, particularly the ones that are sitting in the central part. So Animas and the Camellia San Dimas. Animas, of course, we published a discovery at that target earlier on this year. It was about 6 meters true width, grading just over 900 grams per ton silver equivalent. It was hosted in between and beneath 2 historic mining centers. You're still very high up in the system, and this is reflected by the amount of precious metals versus the influx of base metals. So very, very strong results that absolutely need follow-up on, and that's part of this updated program. Similarly, at Camellia San Dimas, you've got a historic center of mining here with excellent outcrop and grade right at surface. As mentioned, we have poked a few holes in here and we're learning about the controls to the mineralization in this area, but the results to date certainly warrant follow-up. And so those are the 2 primary targets that we'll tackle as part of this 25,000 meter program as we continue to map and work our way towards the east and get more confidence to begin drilling in that area.
All right. I remember when I was on site during that site visit last year, you guys were talking about some of these targets, or at least developing them to drill ready status on the east. Now it sounds like you'll be drilling 2 of them. Is it reasonable to expect the follow-up year that you will be able to drill the ones even further east?
Yes, absolutely. And that is our intention. As I said, we've got over 160 drill ready targets. The geology team is constantly analyzing and compiling new data to prioritize and rank these targets. We've got TerraSpec data collection, which is essentially just finding and mapping the alteration minerals. And what these are really doing for the non-geologists on the call here, what it's doing is identifying where there could be a heat source. The heat source in this type of deposit or this type of system is the engine, right? That's driving the fluids to precipitate out those precious metals, the gold and the silver that we're after. So collecting that data, identifying where these heat centers are, using satellite imagery to also aid in the targeting is really fine pointing why these are such attractive targets. We are working our way towards these targets, but again, topographically much more challenging than what you see down in the western area. And again, you've been to site, they're rolling foothills over here. As we get into the center and the east, it's certainly much more challenging from a topography standpoint.
All right, thanks for addressing that, Mike. You will be drilling some of these this year, so we'll see what the results yield and how aggressive you go back to them. Let's also talk about this other Greenfield exploration, the recently acquired projects, three of them, La Garra, San Enrique, Santa Fe. These properties, what are you doing here? What's the potential of drilling or other exploration work this year?
So these projects, acquired, at basically peak Mexican apathy, right? They are all past producing districts. They all have had limited or no diamond drilling whatsoever. We see this as an excellent opportunity to come in, use the expertise of our exploration team led by Dr. Jesus Velador to go and find new mining centers, new centers of mineralization, and be able to complement potentially the facility that we're developing in the West. But if you look at it as a cumulative production profile, that's what we're ultimately seeing. 20 million ounces coming from project number one, but with operating centers at projects like Santa Fe, past production at San Enrique and La Garra, there's certainly the opportunity to grow that cumulative production profile from multiple mining centers. We have an internal goal here of hitting 50 million ounces of annual production, combined annual production from this trend within the next 10 years. So the most I'd say top priority for us at the moment is Santa Fe, and that was the most recently announced acquisition. This is a property that, again, does have a fully permitted operating 350 ton per day mill on site. These guys have never drilled diamond holes. There's some legacy data where Fortuna drilled about 20,000 meters, and they've got 6 vein targets, as I previously mentioned, that we will absolutely look to go and follow up on. Now, kind of like the secret sauce that we have is that Jesus worked for Fortuna at the time, our VPX. He was instrumental in these targeting programs, and frankly, he did not want to let them go. Fortuna at the time pivoted its corporate strategy and moved out of Mexico. This creates the opportunity for us today. So we know that the main structural controls in and around what we've identified in the West, including Copala, they all trend down to the southeast here, right through San Enrique and on to Santa Fe. So there is a potential continuation of what we've already identified on Panuco 1 that extends all the way down into Santa Fe. So that's exactly what we're going to focus on in and around that mining center, which, if you pull up the press release, that figure 4, you can see the green dot. That's where the mining center is. We will go and explore in and around that using the knowledge that Jesus has, of course, the legacy data provided by past exploration on the Santa Fe ground. And we'll look to rapidly push forward a 43-101 compliant resource.
So when you say in and around where that mine is, what does that mean? Step out distance wise or overall strike length wise?
Yeah, look, within a kilometer of where they're focused on mining, because again, these guys, they're not drilling. They're not doing, development drilling ahead of where they're going. They're mining just based on structure underground, similar to the historic miners that, existed in our region in the past. It was all done optically. So you find the for lack of a better word, you find the shiny stuff and you just mine it. And if you lose the shiny stuff, well, you just go up, walk across maybe, 20, 30 meters, you find the next one, and they would continue. That's essentially what these guys are doing. They have put in some money to develop a modern facility. We visited it, of course, several times, and it's in great shape. So we do see strong potential given all of the legacy data, given Jesus's knowledge, and of course, the operator's knowledge actually on ground of where we can test proximal to that mining center.
Okay, I think it's important to address one other thing about this Santa Fe project because I got questions on the back of talking to Mike about when this acquisition happened. There are a lot of people were focused on the production aspect of it, saying, does this mean the company's going into production faster? Would they scale up production? To me, this sounds more exploration focused, but at least you know that you have something here, so you're going to try to quickly build a resource rather than focus on the whole production angle of this project.
Yeah, and that's right. The production center, it look, the size of the mill is quite small in terms of, our vision at 350 tons per day. We see it as a permitted operating center though. And that holds a lot of weight because going and amending a permit to expand a mill is a heck of a lot quicker than going to permit a brand new build, going through the proper MIA application, the environmental study, and the like. We already have that in place, right? It's grandfathered in. And so the way we see this as expanding and being able to complement what we're doing at Panuco Project One with what we could potentially find here, Santa Fe, and then of course wrapping that up into production in short order.
Now, what about San Enrique? Because that is in between Santa Fe and Panuco. So, what's possible here? What work could you do at San Enrique?
Yeah, exactly. Very similar. In fact, the same operator, the gentleman that sold us Santa Fe, is the same vendor that sold us San Enrique, also held previously by Fortuna, and also previously worked on by our VPX Jesus Velador. So there's this similar aspects. There's just not a permitted currently operating facility. All the structures, those Copala, the Cordon del Oro, that's in the central portion of the district, and you can really see it on that figure 4. They all trend directly through San Enrique and onto our ground. Now, San Enrique, believe it or not, it's quite remote, even though it's so close to us. So, the guys went down early reconnaissance. They camped for, a week or so. They had to ride burros into that district because there's limited road access. Whereas Santa Fe, it has that operating infrastructure.
All right, so then, Mike, overall, let's just talk budget. What is the budget for all this exploration this year?
Yeah, that's a great question, and it's always going to be dependent on ongoing exploration success. We would likely spend $20 million to complete all of the exploration that we've outlined here. But again, that could be expanded based on ongoing exploration success.
All right, Mike, final question then. Just a little background on yourself. As you said, it's your first time on the show. You and I spent time together on the site visit, but give my listeners a bit of a background on you and how you came into the company.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm a geologist and an engineer by background. I do have degrees in economics as well. I've worked for pre-producing and both producing mines, pre-producing in disseminated gold deposits, as well as producing at narrow vein hosted underground silver mine. I then went off to work for one of the brokerage firms as an equity analyst covering the, earlier stage pre-producing companies, both in the precious and the base metal space. That ultimately brought me back to Vizsla Silver. I covered Vizsla Silver as an analyst for a short while, but I saw the writing on the wall. And I saw how excellent the potential of this project is. Infrastructure, near surface nature, incredible quality team to drive it forward with a social license, that's unparalleled. We've got a community here of individuals and ejidos who are the local landowners who really see the value and frankly have become stakeholders. And that really puts us in a different position to push this project forward.
All right, Mike, thank you very much for this update. I'll post a link to the company's website. You can read over that full news release. I'm also going to post figures 1, 2, and 3 since we talked so much about them. Those are those targets on Project 1 right around the Copala resource. If you have any questions for the team at Vizsla, please email me, fleck@kereport.com, and I'll follow up as we get some more news out of the company. So, Mike, thanks again for your time today. I appreciate the update.
Thanks, everyone.